Hello, all, and welcome to the Movie Bears podcast. I'm Brad Harris, and each week I'm joined by some of my favorite husky, hairy, huggable homos to review films, either current or classic. And this week we've got a current film coming at you from Disney-Pixar, that, of course, being Luca, the new animated film about a fish boy who longs for life on the surface. That may sound a little familiar, maybe, but it's its own thing, I promise. Exclamation point. We're probably going to have a conversation about that. But before we get into any of our film discussion goodness, let me introduce my co-hosts. Jim Pugliafico is on the show. Hey, sweetheart. How's it going?
It's going good. I'm glad to be here and talking about another new movie with you guys. I can't wait to get into talking about this one. I think there's a lot to dig into. So I'm really excited.
Glad you're excited. It should be a good discussion. I'm looking forward to hearing what you gentlemen think about this film. Jim, I know your thoughts a little bit already because, we watched it together. But I feel like there's a whole well of untapped things I don't know yet. So I'm stoked. Also, really jazzed to hear from William Lindis, who is also with us. Will, rocking the mic from Austin, Texas. How are you, my friend?
Doing great. Although, as much as I love it here in Austin, Texas, I'm pretty happy to go on a trip to the Italian coast with the two of you. So, yeah, I'm in vacation mode right now mentally. Let's just hop on a boat let's hop on a bike and travel along the coast, huh?
I'll bring the pasta.
Ooh, actually, I think once we get a little further into the discussion, I think we're gonna have to figure out which roles in the race we do. But that's getting ahead of
us. That's your homework, Will. You got to remember to bring that up so we can figure it out.
Yeah.
Hey, we've got some folks hanging out with us in the live chat. Some comments already here. Gregorio says hi. Hello, Gregorio. Good to see you. Welcome. Oh my gosh, Bill Zanowitz from the Comic Book Bears podcast is here. He says, hey, fellas. Hey, Bill. Bill just had his first time back in a movie theater, I think, since COVID happened. Bill, I was so happy to see you so happy in your photos from your theater experience. Glad you got to do that and then come to a movie podcast.
Yeah, and I wanted some damn good movies to watch for his trip back, too.
Right. He did. I think he did a double header one day, and I wanted to hear what he thought. I know one of them was the Sparks Brothers documentary, and maybe the other one was Luca. No, Luca wasn't in theater.
No. Got it.
He says saw the Sparks Brothers in a theater, and then Luca back to back on Sunday. Looking forward to hearing what you fellas thought of the latter. Definitely happy to provide some thoughts on that, Bill, and so glad you got back to the theater. Daniel Jensen, oh my gosh, it's like a reunion here on the Movie Bears podcast tonight. It says, hey, Bears, love you guys. Handsome, we love you just as much. Welcome. Glad to have you here.
Oh, man, it's so great. Now, we love talking movies, but it's so much more fun when we have a crew here with us, and we've got a damn good crew gathered. So, yay, let's do this thing.
Yes, we do. All right. Well, let me just get this out of the way up front. We're going to be talking about Luca, spoiler-free, for probably 10 or 15 minutes. If you haven't seen it yet, and that's okay. Not everybody has, but maybe you're looking for external opinions that might help you sway, one way or the other. We're certainly happy to give some spoiler-free thoughts if those are helpful. But we are going to do, forgive the pun, a deep dive review of Luca. But we'll give you plenty of fair warning before we kind of open up that can of spoilers and let them out into the world to do their thing. But just kind of be aware if you are listening live with us right now, welcome. So glad to have you here. If you want to avoid spoilers, but come on back for the end when we do some plugs. Once we give you that warning, you can step away for a little while and come back. If you are watching through the magic and digital wonder of Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, however you access your podcasts, you can access the show notes and find the time index that Jim puts together there for you to bounce around as needed. All right. all of that said, Phil says deep dive. See what you did there. Yeah, you did. You caught me. You caught me. Anyway, Jim, Will, let's do this thing. Here we go. Our discussion of Luca. All right. So, Will, if you don't mind, give us a brief setup of this film. What is it? What is it about? Of course, spoiler free. And then your initial thoughts. Was this worth catching up with? Is this worth sleeping on? What did you think?
Yeah, so Luca is the latest outing by Disney-Pixar. You can find it on the Disney Plus app. So if you have that streaming platform, you can watch it right away. This movie is... I'll read the IMDb description, but I take umbrage with a big part of it here. The description reads, on the Italian Riviera, an unlikely but strong friendship grows between a human being and a sea monster disguised as a human. And that description, I feel like, is missing one of the core parts of this movie. This movie is about this young boy named Luca who lives under the sea. He's a sea monster. He lives there with his sea monster friends and with the sea monster family in their sea monster community.
As one does.
As one does. And until he starts to grow restless for several different reasons and decides to venture into a place where he's been formerly forbidden, which is the surface land where the humans are. Now, the humans on the surface, they don't like sea monsters one bit, and it's very dangerous for sea monsters to go up there. But Luca goes up there. He meets Alberto, and this is the part I take umbrage with. I think one of the core parts of this is the friendship between Luca and Alberto, who are both sea monsters on the surface. They do meet some other people on the surface. There's a friendship with a human that does form, and the three of them get involved in some hijinks set against the backdrop of an impending bicycle / other things race that's coming up. Lots of things going on in this movie. First of all, this is a striking, beautiful movie. Disney-Pixar are great at... It seems like those Pixar guys, I don't know, they're good at animating things, I guess. And they definitely deliver here. There's so many spots where just everything in the background is just beautiful. Like, you want to explore the cities. You want to, like stick your head underwater as like the waves are like crashing and cresting. The character designs are charming and very unique kind of within the style that they're going for, both in the human form and the sea monster form. The story is actually pretty darn good. It's very different than what you'd expect with the Disney Pixar movie. I think we've come to think of them in terms of like the highest tier ones being things like Inside Out, which are like these existential, soul-crushing like treatise on what it is to be a human being. That's not what Luca is. In fact, a friend of the show, Chris Lopez, nailed it best. This feels almost in terms of like tone and structure more like a Studio Ghibli film than anything else. This is a film that's about the exploration and about the events. There are stakes definitely here, but they are not as I guess, again, existential and soul-crushing as you get in some of them. But there are some good metaphors, some good themes within this movie. The voice acting is solid. Jacob Tremblay is Luca here. We love Jacob Tremblay. At least I do. Jack Dylan Grazer plays Alberto. We've seen him in It. He played Eddie. We also got to see him in Shazam as the brother in that. Maya Rudolph and Jim Gaffigan put in some good work. It's just a good crew altogether. I really liked this movie. I think it's going to be hard because I think when you think about like the best Disney Pixar movies of all time and you make that inevitable list, because we always make lists, does this make that list? No, it probably doesn't for me. I think that it's, I think that it's an incredibly good movie. It does everything that it needs to do incredibly well. I don't know that it has like the long-lasting staying power of some of the top-tier Disney Pixar, but I think that's okay. I enjoyed everything this movie gave me. Had a wonderful little moment watching at home. A little bit of a cry there at the end too, as these movies are prone to do. I don't know. I liked it quite a bit, and I would recommend it very strongly to damn near anyone.
All right. Well, that's a big win from Will. Jim, how about for you? Did this movie land equally as well, or was it maybe a bit of a misstep?
Oh, well, let me see. I actually adored this movie. And we're going to get into a bunch of stuff about it, I'm sure, because we have a whole show to talk about it. But this was a great surprise to me after Soul. I had no real expectations going into this movie. I had seen maybe the one trailer. Is the first Pixar, I think, after Soul, which won the Academy Award this year, Oscar for best or last year for best animated feature. Soul was good, but it actually didn't rock my world like this gem did. So I have to give this one all the due credit that it deserves. And as you said, Will, on the surface, it's like a delightful, gorgeous, and humorous fable, right? Of summertime adventure, friendship. There's themes of like acceptance of otherness in here, which I think is kind of the main theme. And thematically, we will talk about this, but I think it's kind of a beautiful allegory of coming out. Although, and I've read a little bit about this, and what I feel is their usual cowardly stance on LGBT representation in Disney. The Disney company, of course, is hedging its bets and withdrawing from any discussion about whether there's LGBT themes in this movie, which I hope we'll get into that because I think that's a discussion worth having. Because there is a strong subtext in here about sea monsters, coming to the surface and coming out, which, sure, it speaks to the kind of generic otherliness, but it also suggests something I think a little bit more relatable to an LGBT audience. At least it did for me. And that is like having that first time connection to someone who's different, just like you are. And I really love that about this movie. I thought it hit that nail like right on the head. And yes, so people are going to say it's fair to say that this film borrows from probably a lot of different properties and a lot of different movies that came before it. Let's talk about some, like The Little Mermaid. Brad, you hinted about that right at the top. Gromit and Wallace, at least in the animation style, kind of like the facial features and specifically the mouth movements and stuff. Disney's Pinocchio. There's a great little movie from the 80s. I don't know if anybody will remember it except me, called Breaking Away, which has to do with a group of friends coming together and entering a bike race. I think it borrows from that a little bit. Chris said Miyazaki films, like maybe Porco Rosso, which I haven't seen, but it's on my list. And then there's the Call Me By Your Name comparison. Huh? Yeah. And Ponyo, that's right. And then there's a Call Me By Your Name comparison, which probably warrants a bit of our conversation. I'll just say I have a lot more to say, but I've already talked a lot, so I'm just going to say I really, really love this film. I will say it's to me, it's probably is kind of on that top shelf of Pixar films.
All right, awesome. So a big win from Jim as well. Jim, definitely want to get back into the LGBTQ discussion piece about this. I don't know that I agree with you, but I'd love to hear your thoughts, and maybe we can kind of talk that through a little bit. I will say this movie was fun. It was interesting. It had a cool premise, but it was pretty milquetoast for me. And this is not one of those times where I pretend to not like a movie and then I'm like, surprise, no, I really did. I don't know. Like my benchmark for films, especially Disney-Pixar films, is how much they make me feel or not. And I didn't really feel much in this movie. Jim, you mentioned Soul. I ugly cried in Soul. I didn't cry a single time during this movie, which is like unheard of for a Disney-Pixar film for me. I don't know. I don't know. For some reason, this one just didn't do it for me.
Something was obviously wrong with you that day.
Yeah, maybe I just wasn't in touch with my emotions. I don't know. Or maybe I was just coming down from the high of being at like a bear pool party or something, and my head was
Maybe that's what it was.
back in that space. I don't know. But I mean, I was entertained. I enjoyed watching it. It was cute, but it was nothing that I would really write home about. For me personally, I don't think it's going to make my top 10 end of year list. But I think it's awesome that it's impacting people as much as it did you and Will, that you guys loved it as much as you did. I know a lot of folks out there are really enjoying this film. And the fact that it's on streaming is great, because I'll tell you, I have several friends who are mama bears. They're raising their brood. They have multiple children, and their kids have watched this movie probably 8 to 10 times since it became available on streaming. And I will say, in this movie's favor, this is one of those films that at least the mama bears I know who've mentioned it so far haven't gotten annoyed at it being on 8 times or 10 times. Which is good. I did really like Jacob Tremblay in this. I heard his going into this film, I knew nothing about who was in it. Me guys, I try to not watch trailers. I don't read a lot about movies that are coming out because I want to go in as pure as possible. But I was like, oh my God, I know that voice. And I turned to Jim to say, like, who is that? And Jim's like, Jacob Tremblay. And I'm like, thank you. Appreciate that. You got me, boo. And then the mom I was trying to figure out forever, and then we looked it up after, and it was Maya Rudolph. And I'm like, oh my gosh, Maya Rudolph as an animated mom again. I'm here for it. That's awesome. Some very cool visuals with this film. The music was awesome. It makes me want to go to Italy, babe. Not that real Italy probably looks and sounds like that, but quaint seaside town on the Italian coast, pasta, beaches.
Right.
I'm down for it. I'm down for it. I'm just saying, let's plan a trip someday.
Absolutely.
Brad, before we get too far into the discussion, I would be remiss if I didn't ask this question. So at the bear pool party over the weekend, were there any sea monsters underneath the water?
There was some floating on the water.
You don't have to answer.
Sea monkeys, sea monkeys, sea monkeys, sea monkeys.
Our hosts had these really cute little like cutiony.
That's what you're talking about.
Monster like toys. They weren't like blow up. They were like, I don't know. They're like pillow, like spongy, and they were really colorful and stuff. And come to mention it, they kind of did look like sea monsters.
There you go. It's thematic.
There were other sea monsters under the water too.
And that's what I was getting at. There we go. I
figured that's where you were going. Electric eels all day. Yeah.
I felt some grab a hold of me at some point. Like, believe it or not.
Yeah.
For more information about this particular story, please tune in to our MBP After Dark,
our sister podcast. Exclusive.
Yeah,
it's funny. I have often thought if we ever did a Patreon or something like that, we could like go back to recording a show on Skype, but then we could have just be download only, where we can be as like crude and vulgar and talk about all the things we want to talk about. I don't know if that's something you guys would want to do.
Yeah,
but,
we could do that.
I mean, first of all, I wouldn't hate that idea at all. There are times, I mean, like I don't monitor my language in terms of like not dropping F-bombs or anything on here, but I mean, we do have a broader audience here. There are times where where I've veered away from a particular topic, and I know you guys have as well.
I mean, I have coworkers that listen to the show, so
hi coworkers that listen to the show.
Right. Jim, you said frankly, we could call it MBP, frankly speaking.
Sure. Ooh. Something like along those lines. Yeah.
Anyway, food for thought.
Back to
the movie. This one is, I would say it's a recommend for me, in that like it's a cute movie. Like, watch it, you'll probably enjoy it. But it's not like oh my gosh, this has to be the first thing you see. I can think of like 8 other things right now that are probably more exciting, just from my own perspective to see. But it is a very weak yes. So, am I a heartless monster? That's for all of you to decide. I don't know.
Chime in with the chat. I don't know.
Yeah,
does Brad have a heart?
Yeah, and I've seen other and I appreciate that you didn't maybe like it as much as me. And usually we don't have this much of a disparity in our movies, really. But I don't know. I see a lot of folks saying that it's lesser Pixar. It's slight or it's minor, low stakes, bland, less ambitious. I've seen. And maybe because it's just right up my alley, but to me, this is, like I said, it really hits on all aspects to me, and I think it's about as strong, as powerful as anything Pixar has done. I think maybe because I'm wondering if this did not get a theatrical release, did it?
To my knowledge, no. Like, it wasn't.
I don't think it said.
Theaters.
I would have loved to be able to. I would have loved the opportunity to see this on a big screen. You got to remember, a lot of people are now watching this on a small screen, and usually, we're used to seeing Pixar feature films that are released in the middle of summer, like on a big screen, and that's a bit of a shift. I'm not sure why that decision was made. There's probably a lot of business stuff behind it. And who knows, but I would have really loved to be able to see this on the big screen. I think, Brad, you mentioned, we know we're going to cry in Pixar movies, probably at the end. I was tearing up early on in this movie when Luca is first, meeting the other character in this movie. I'll just say that. I'm not going to spoil anything. And they're kind of getting to know each other. And to me, that friendship between those characters, like as two boys sharing like a summer adventure together, like, is so pitch perfect to me. And maybe it reminds me of some of the friendships that I had, years and years and years ago growing up. That other people, maybe if they're lucky, had those friendships or relationships that have, that they have fond memories of. And maybe that's what it is. I don't know. Or maybe it's because of my Italian heritage, even though I've never been to Italy. Just loving the portrayal of that small seaside fishing village, and the characters that are in it, I thought was great. So I think it hit for me on a lot of areas that that I can understand. Maybe it won't hit for other people, but yeah, I mean, this was fantastic, I thought.
I think one of the things that I appreciated so much is that it does feel different than some of the more recent, especially the most recent kind of run of Disney-Pixar films. And I think that could be very alienating, and I totally acknowledge that. This movie, and I mentioned this before, it really wanted to get away from an exploration of what it is to experience our emotions, or what it is to experience our soul, which are all super valid things. And I loved those movies too. And in this one, the story is smaller in scale, but still, for me, exquisitely done. And I like that. It almost feels like this is a more delicate offering than we've maybe gotten recently from Pixar, but I think it's just as flavorful, just in its own way. But that said, because it is such a departure, I totally get where it wouldn't click the same way some of those others will, because it is a very different type of film.
I do want to call out how this movie looked in terms of its animation style. Two things to me stood out, was the color palette that was used here, the ultra vivid color palette. I thought worked really well for this movie, because it's a movie about childhood, and I think we kind of experience things like that in childhood. Everything's like bolder, brighter, like happier color palette, and I thought that was a perfect choice for this movie, and it worked very well, especially when characters changing from human to sea monster and so forth. I thought that was done really well. And the other thing about the animation was there were several scenes where there was movement, or there was a flying scene through like around buildings and like a coliseum. I thought and there was a train scene, I think. I think those movement scenes seemed like they had taken a technological leap somehow in their animation style, because they really popped to me. And didn't seem so generic. So those are the two things, at least visually, that I'd love to call out about the movie.
You know, you mentioned the color palette, and I think the other place where that really demonstrated it to me was this movie did do had a lot of fun with sort of the gags of when one of the characters was dry and on land, and like they would get partially wet, and sometimes it was for a story reason, sometimes it would just be something would happen and they would just get a few flecks of the color on them and they'd have to dry it off or something along those lines. And it always visually popped, even if it was just a couple of small dots. It always jumped off the screen at you. So you would see like, oh, this is a thing they're experiencing real quick, okay, now they're right back into it. And when we talk a little bit more about some of the themes of this movie, and some of the metaphors that are there, I think that sort of helped him like all of those gears like click into place for me.
Yeah, there's a lot to talk about in spoilers, so we should probably get to that here relatively shortly. But real quick before we do, because Jim, you had called out people seeing this from home. Bill Z commented that he thinks Pixar can pull off a smaller stakes film, which is a triumph in and of itself, but he thought the intimacy of seeing it at home added to it wonderfully. Jim, I was curious from your perspective, did seeing it at home take away from the experience for you? I know you mentioned wanting to see it in the theater, but did it take away anything?
I can't say, because there's nothing to take away from. But like I said, we watched it at home, but with some friends around, right? So I don't know. Maybe I was holding back my emotions a little bit, because who likes to cry in front of their friends? You know what I mean? But over a movie about sea monsters. So maybe I was a little squelched that way. But visually and sound wise, I thought it worked really well, even on the screen. That's why I would really love to see this thing get some kind of like a 2-week release in theaters. I don't know if it'll happen. Yeah.
Will, how about for you? Did watching it at home take away from your experience at all?
It didn't. I will say though that I have a couple of things that are benefits to my house. Like I have a nice television, good sound system, and it was just the two of us, and I've gotten good over the years at sort of like phone discipline and stuff like that when watching things at home. So I say all of those things to say that like there are probably a lot of people out there who are having to watch this in a smaller television in the other room of the house, or who are having to watch this while also preparing dinner for the kids, or who have distractions, or aren't able to dim the lights entirely because they've got kids doing the coloring books, or whatever it is that might be happening. And all of those things, I think, can detract from the experience. So I think for me, like personally, I still got like that connection to the movie that I was looking for, but I do wish it had the theatrical, because I do know that like there are some people who the only time that they can get that like separation from real life and like the realm of moviedom is when they're in that theater experience.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's one of the reasons I actually don't like watching movies at home. And Jim will tell you, early on in our relationship, anytime he wanted to watch a movie at home, I'd be like, sure, let's watch a movie. Nowadays, he's like, I think I'm going to put a movie on. And I'm like, I think I'm going to pass. I just get really distracted by things at home. The squirrel jumping on the bird feeder outside the window, 3 feet to the right of our TV, whatever the cats are doing, my phone vibrating. There's just a lot of things at home. The sound of the dryer running because we forgot to close the door, and well, my feet are up. Do I really want to go close the door and pause the movie, or just live through it? So all of those things kind of take me out of it. I don't know, babe, if watching this in the projector room would have maybe had a different experience, because that's much more insular when we watch things that way. We just didn't have the room to have the friends watch it with us in the projector room. So,
Right.
Part of me worries that maybe my opinion is what it is because I was pulled out of the film by some things. But at the same time, like we watched Onward at home, and I cried just as much watching Onward at home, than in the theater maybe. So I'm just curious how big a role those things play sometimes.
And Brad, that's not unfair either. If the only way that someone can watch this, if the only way that it's available is in that home environment, then comparing, then sharing your experience with, like, yeah, there were distractions happening around me, is valid because that's the only way that you could have possibly consumed it.
That's fair to say. And I appreciate your grace, Will, in saying so. So let's get into some spoilers, because I know we got a whole lot we want to unpack here. So we're going to go ahead and make that jump. If you have not yet seen Luca and you value your virtual innocence where the plot of the film is concerned, this is your time. If you're listening live, step away for about 21 minutes and 11 seconds, and then come on back for some plugs. If you're listening through the magic of digital tape delay, go ahead and use the time index in the show notes. Skip on ahead to those plugs because you're not going to want to miss those. But spoilers are officially fair game. Goodbye to anybody that we lost making that jump to spoilers. Hope to see you next time. But I want to start with just a very minor quibble. It's very, very minor. You guys brought up the conceit of the whole characters getting wet thing, and oh no, a couple drops of water made spots on the arm, or oh no, he fell off the boat and now he's got to get back in the boat and somehow dry off in time. Sea monsters must dry incredibly quickly, because when I fall in the water with my clothes on, they are fucking sopping wet.
Oh yeah.
And you can't just smooth it out with your hands and the water is gone. And so are they magic? I mean, obviously they're magical or mutants or something. I don't know, but they must.
Is this part of the X-Men universe?
They must have gotten some pretty enhanced drying power tutorial lessons from Charles Xavier. I don't know, but it was a little weird.
You know what they probably got? So if you ever watch like the Peanuts, like Charlie Brown and stuff, maybe they have like Charlie Brown magic hands, like when they make the Christmas tree or anything, they go, and then it's just they've got that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. They're sea monsters, so obviously it's been proven that the sea monsters do not, they dry really quickly and their skin sheds, their scales shed water.
I see.
They can't absorb any water. It can't, because when they're in the water, right? If they absorb water, they'd just be heavy and they'd fucking drown. So,
I just wanted to see one of the sea monsters put his thumb in his mouth and blow, and then you just see water droplets pop out of their skin and fly away, and that's the explanation.
Or maybe shake like a dog, like a shaggy dog in a movie.
Totally. And then take off their wet clothes because they'd still be wet. But
if they lived in Arizona, then I might believe it.
Then I totally get it. Right? I totally get it. You fell in the water, and 2 seconds later, you're completely dry. Hi, Tucson. Good to see you. Anyway, it's very minor quibble.
I mean, that part's super fair too. Every time I visited Tucson, it's so funny when you go to different places. They're check out these sites. Go there. Whenever I visit Arizona, it's always just here's 18 bottles of water. Don't forget to drink them, or you will die. Thanks, I'm here.
So this is another reason, and we're going to get into this discussion, but this is the other reason why I think this is a great metaphor for queerness and coming out, because a lot of times when people are trying to stay in the closet, right, or hide who they really are, which is what these characters are doing when they're out of the water, sometimes their real self leaks through in parts, right? So in this case, it was water on the skin that allowed their real self to be shown. But in real life, if it's queerness, you might have little quirks that some people might associate with you might have feminine quirks, or you might say something, that could identify you. And I think that's a great metaphor for people trying to hide who they really are, and having it kind of show up in this way. And they just used water as the mechanism for that.
It's interesting. As I was watching this, I picked up very strongly, and part of it's because I screen for a queer film festival, and so we're constantly looking for films that are thematically appropriate and that reflect the themes of, you know, coming out or life after you've come out, whatever it happens to be. And I think those were very, for me at least, very apparent in this film. This is, you know, these are characters who are trying to fit in with the culture that would not appreciate them for who they are. They had to hide that part of themselves at any and all costs. And I think that is very, very, very true, very, very fitting for the experience of many people, many queer people who have had, in fact, probably all of us to some degree or another, have had to, or still do currently, hide in some of these different ways. I think that part of the place where it gets a little muddled for me is I think that there are people who immediately clicked on queer themes because it's set in the Italian Riviera, and they were immediately going like, oh, like Call Me by Your Name. And I didn't really get much of a comparison besides it's set in Italy.
It's vague, but yeah.
Excuse me. It's not Call Me by Your Name. It's Calamari by Your Name.
Calamari by Your Name. Yeah. I'll be honest. I feel like, and at least for me, like I've seen some of the comparisons between the two, and I feel like they feel a little thin to me just because it's the setting is the biggest connection there. And I think predominantly because the relationship between the two characters here
is a summer relationship.
And it's also like, you know, this is a platonic relationship. These are two friends, and it's okay that they're here. Honestly, the story the queer story that this reminded me more of was Tu Wong Fu, in that it's a group of people from a very different culture from the one that they're sort of like masking within. And through the course of the story, they both try to reconcile themselves while also then making a profound influence on the people that they interact with. So that's my hot take. This is closer to Tu Wong Fu than Call Me by Your Name. I know I will be the only person on that hill, but
we could have a whole discussion about that hill, Will.
Yeah.
No, I could totally see where you're coming from there. I mean, you know, we're in spoilers and possible spoilers for Tu Wong Fu, but like by the end of both of these films, these communities who otherwise would not have accepted gay drag queens and, you know, purple sea monsters, now they're integrating them into their community, and they're okay, and they've learned and they've grown and changed. So I could definitely see that. I guess for me, I don't know. I see where you're coming from, babe. Like I see how someone could see, you know, the whole hiding thing, and it maybe be reminiscent of the gay thing to them. But it didn't feel distinctly queer to me. I mean, you could put that facade on a lot of different things, and I think it would make sense, you know. We were talking about In the Heights last week. Before I got booted from the show, couldn't get back in. Thank you again for that. You know, and one of the things that was brought up was like the you know, just the controversy around most of the Latinx folks being very light skinned, maybe being able to pass, you know, and I hate that term, but like I saw someone liken the story in Luca to that, where like you could be a very light skinned Latinx person, but like, oops, maybe you just said a Spanish word in a group of your white friends and it reminded them that you were different. So I think, to the movie's credit, this could probably be applied to a lot of different things. And I think it's cool that whatever community you're part of or whatever background you're coming from, if you see yourself in this and you see your struggle in this, I think that's a mark of a good movie, whether I feel it's distinctly queer or not. So I do think that's cool.
And that's part of queer film theory as it is too, is that there's some films, like if you're watching a film like Moonlight, okay, that fits very strongly within the oeuvre of what what constitutes a queer film because it wears its on its sleeve. You know, you can't not look at a film like Moonlight or Brokeback Mountain as anything but queer. But with queer film theory, you can also look at films that have those themes and can be interpreted, to exactly your point there, Brad. They can be interpreted through that lens, but also through other lenses as well. And you can apply those different lenses and have totally different discussions on them, and both of them be very valid, because you know, like when we're looking at it from a queer lens, we are very hyper focused at it from those queer themes. So this one hits, I think it hits on both of those levels for me. You know, you could make the case that this film is very much about othering, and specifically othering when one part of the community has more power than the other. And when we look at this, like the world around us and the different, you know, interlocking parts of society that we inhabit, like there are a lot of groups that have to experience that. You can apply probably their lens to this film just as easily and have a good, valid reading.
Yeah. And I think for me, maybe it was all of the elements together that was included in this movie. The boys as sea monsters were these like colorful characters with pretty much every color. You know what I mean? Like they were just so vibrant colors, you know, reminiscent of to me a little bit of kind of like rainbow colors. There was a scene late in the movie where there's two women who we see early in the movie. And as Brad said, you know, they could be sisters, they could be cousins, whatever. But they were obviously sea monsters.
I'm going on the record and saying that I did think they were a lesbian couple. That's one of the queer things.
How do you code them as queer, but not like other characters in the movie?
Because they were going out on an ice cream date together, and they were walking very close, arm in arm.
So Vespa riding together is not the same as ice cream riding together. Let's get that right.
Well, listen, I'm just going to say this, and I don't want to sound like the Disney lawyers who are pushing that this isn't a queer thing, but like this is 2 kids, 3 kids, really. If you bring Julia into it, and I did not feel a hint of sexual tension. I didn't feel a hint of romantic love between the 2 boys. If anything, I felt like the Luca character had a little bit of a crush on Julia. And God, this feels weird to say, but like, I don't know. I did not get the queer vibe out of it. I think that you did. Did I just miss a lot of subtext? I mean, no, it sounds like maybe I did.
I think for me, I'm thinking queer in terms of like, take it out of the realm of sexualization, take it out of the realm of romanticism, right? This is just 2 friends who know they're different from everybody else, who have finally found somebody who's like them, and they have an affinity for each other as a friendship. That's it. But
how is that gay? Like when I was growing up in school, like I got super excited when I met someone else who loved comic books and Star Wars, right, because those were things you were not supposed to love back then. I got to be myself with that person, but like it wasn't a queer thing. It was, you know, oh my God, you're a nerd too.
Right.
Cool.
Right. Yeah. And
I think the fact that it's for kids and it's featuring kids is sort of part and parcel to it, because first of all, from the it's featuring kids, you can have, it is possible to have queer themes without having overt sexuality, you know, like there, you know, like it starts to get kind of really deep down into like, you know, the difference between like, you know, the romantic versus sexuality parts of like, you know, sexuality to begin with. But even further beyond that, the fact that it's targeted towards kids, a lot of times when we use fable or metaphor to instruct kids on things, we're telling them in something that is adjacent to the story itself. And less so now than before. I think now we can have shows like Steven Universe that have more direct queer representation on screen. We start to see families and like, I don't know, like Arthur and like all of these different shows where there are actual like, you know, like same-sex couplings within them. But when you're teaching the kids the story of basically, hey, sometimes people feel like they have to hide themselves to fit in with society, and they shouldn't have to, because we should all be able to live together, whether that be from the queer lens or whether that be from, dealing with like immigration issues in the United States, or whatever it happens to be, whichever lens you're looking at it from this perspective. You can tell a broader story to still teach that parable without actually like specifically making the characters like on-screen queer. So in this case, for me, I was able to get those queer themes from the characters, even though I didn't catch any like queer sexuality between Luca and Alberto themselves, if that makes sense.
It absolutely makes sense. I mean, and Pixar and Disney have played with that idea all along. Like many relationships that grow into adult relationships start off as friendships as children. I mean, look at even in Up, in the first part of Up, the two characters, the old man and the woman, meet as little kids, and they play together and they have fun times. And there's obviously a connection there. That's all I'm saying. I'm not trying to sexualize it at all, and I never would. But I think it's there in this movie. I think there is that beginning of a connection between these two characters, and that's why I coded as queer.
I think as great as it is to project movies on screens, I think it's also wonderful when we can project ourselves on movies. So, if it is queer coded for you and that feels awesome, I think that's fantastic. At the end of the day, it's our own personal like relationship with the film and what we think we got out of it. You know what I mean? What we feel we got out of it. So I think it's great that it does that for you.
Now, the other side of this, I do think that I want to make sure I put out there is, even though I do pick up on those themes and I do give them credit for what they've done here, I also do want to sort of like just make sure that we are putting like a little visible tally in the air that this is a Disney movie that is also getting away with getting a lot of like queer brownie points while also not giving us representation, which is not an issue for the film itself, but it is an issue for kind of the Disney structure as a whole. Like, I do want to see more on-screen direct representation. And again, it didn't have to be this film, but I do want to say, like, Disney, if I'm going to give you credit for giving me some queer themes here, then you got to also give me some queer characters in the next one, whatever it happens to be. You have to,
or at least acknowledge it. At least acknowledge it.
Because what we see nowadays with the queer characters that do appear on Disney movies, which each one gets walked back so that the next one can become the first openly gay, whatever. We had Arnie in 101 Dalmatians. We had the character from Beauty and the Beast, LeFou. They intentionally set their queer characters in the most edit-aroundable positions possible. And that becomes incredibly frustrating when you see that happen continuously. So I want to put all of that out there. Can I see this as a queer-coded film? Yes. Does this mean that Disney has done enough to satisfy me as a queer hungry audience member? No. Give me direct representation in the next one, or soon. Yeah.
Can I just say, can we please have the first 10 minutes of Up, but with two boys or two girls or two intersex people? Like, can we just have it over for once?
Yeah,
please.
Yes,
we matter. Representation matters.
Like, what would the opening of Up like that's actually a perfect example of one, because I think that's a place where you could have told the exact same fucking story. The relationship with the kid, the dodo, the talking dogs, the weird balloons. You can do all that same shit and just make it a same-sex relationship. I understand their fear as to why they didn't. This is a creepy old man going on a trip with a kid, and now he's gay. But you know what? The people that are going to say that bullshit are going to say that bullshit no matter what. So at some point, you just have to pull the Band-Aid off and give us real representation.
Yep. Yeah. And that's my only point, is that, anyway, now, not to get too deep. There's a few other things I want to mention before we have to get off.
All right. We got 3 minutes and 2 seconds. Go.
Just going to list them. Jesus. Food porn, pasta. Did anybody else end up hungry for pasta watching this movie?
I'm still hungry for pasta. I don't know why we're having grilled cheese instead of spaghetti and meatballs tonight. Just saying.
Only because it takes longer. You know, I love to cook those Italian meals. I want to say the humor in this movie was pretty good, pretty on par. There was some cool puns, Brad, which I don't know if you picked up on or not. I love the little Italian phrases like "Silenzio Bruno." That were kind of scattered throughout, which was good because it was funny, but it was also meaningful in that we all have our doubts about stuff. And that was a great and simple way to represent like, hey, here's how we deal with our insecurities and our doubts
that's how we silence our inner saboteur.
Yeah. I thought that was really great. And I also want to mention the building of bike ramps is something I did as a kid. Like I did a lot of that. I crashed off of a lot of them, so I could relate to that part of the movie.
I needed to ask this question earlier. I feel like I may have just based on this conversation have solved it. But if we were doing the three-legged race right now, which role would everyone be in? Who would be the bicycler? Who would eat the pasta? Who would?
I can't eat as much as I used to, so I don't think I would do the eating. I would either do the swimming or the biking. If either one of you don't feel comfortable with their swimming skills, I'll take the swimming.
I was gonna take swimming if it was clear on the table because we used to we grew up with pools, and I helped my sister train for like swimming teams and stuff like that. I feel like the one thing that sucks about having moved here to Austin is it's the first time in my life where I don't have a pool, so I feel like totally out from that. Although, I mean, it's whatever. It's
fun. Obviously, I've been trained to eat my whole life, so obviously I'm the pasta guy.
Well, I was only going to.
You also ride bike. You also ride bikes.
I know, but that's already taken, so I got to be the pasta eater.
All right, I'll eat pasta.
I was going to give you pasta.
To win if I'm eating pasta.
I was going to give you pasta and give Jim bike just in my head canon, only because at one point Jim said I built ramps as a kid, and at one point Brad said, "Oh, it made me want pasta." So just contextually off of the storyline.
Yeah, I think we'll just switch in and out as needed.
We'll just do all of them.
Yeah,
we'll all do it. Yeah.
It'll be great. So literally 2 seconds, 1 second, you're done. But we can keep talking about the movie for a little while. I'm not that
Julia's
much of a
bearish dad.
He was hot.
Yeah, he had that dad mustache going, didn't he?
I liked the animation of his chest hair popping up out of his shirt.
I'm sure you
did. Have you seen so the director on this, Enrico Casarosa, he had a short film back in 2011 called La Luna. Have you guys seen
that? Yep.
Yeah. Do you remember the Papa in that?
I need to go back and watch that because there is a connection.
So the Papa in that looks a lot like the Papa in this one, just with 2 arms instead of 1, but just a big, burly, heavily mustachioed guy.
I thought it was the same character. Is it not?
Why couldn't it be? Could it be?
It could be, yeah.
I mean,
sure it could be.
But I mean, why not? Yeah. Well, I mean, they did make it like they tried to say, look, he was born that way with the 1 arm. So I think that it's like I think it's an alternate reality version of him.
Okay. It's the DC multiverse is what it is.
It's the DC. It's like if this were an episode of Fringe, like they're on the other side of the thing.
When Crisis on Infinite Earths happened, the dad from La Luna and the dad from Luca, 2 movies, by the way, that begin with L, are going to be merged into the same character. He'll have a little bit of a different backstory, but he'll have the same dad stash.
Crisis on Infinite Italies.
That's amazing. I love it. Any final thoughts on Luca before we get into some plugs?
I think go ahead, Will.
I was going to say, I love it, and Bill says it in chat here. I love the voice acting here. Jacob Tremblay was so damned good at this. He had these like voice trembles, like kind of like that, like the certain like tenor to his voice that made the character, like you could hear like in scenes where they were just going, yeah, woo, just like dumb animated, like, like cheerful shit. And it always jumped out at me. I also super loved Maya Rudolph. If you guys ever want a fun experience, watch a movie with Scott, my partner. He has like lightning like reflexes with his ears or whatever for like picking out these things, because we'll just be sitting there and going like, oh, Maya Rudolph, and I'll be like, oh my god, you're right. Like I don't have to IMDb them sometimes, because he'll just go like, I think that's the guy from this other thing, and I do not have that skill set. He is just so damn. He is a walking IMDb for just like literally for voice actors in animated movie. He nails them every time.
I didn't get Maya Rudolph, but I got Sacha Baron Cohen right away. Like,
yes, you did.
Yeah, yeah. He was. That was one. They were like, "Oh, that's Sacha Baron Cohen," I think. And but you're right, Jacob Tremblay. I was shocked at like how well he did the voice of Luca in this one. Like, I'm like, okay, cred to that guy for being able to nail that voice, because I think he brought a lot to the character.
Now that I think about it, maybe it's just Maya Rudolph he's super good with, because I was thinking about like what was the last character he did this with, and we watched
it's Maya Rudolph.
Mitchell's versus the Machines, and Maya Rudolph is the mom in that as well.
Yeah.
And the exact same thing happened about a third of the way into the movie. It goes like, oh, that's Maya Rudolph. So maybe he's just a Maya Rudolph stan.
He's on the Maya Rudolph train, apparently.
All right. Well, why don't we go ahead and move away from Luca? We're done with our trip to the Italian coast for now, but who knows? Maybe we'll revisit it in Luca 2, Electric Boogaloo. But let's move on to some quick plugs if we got them. That's what we're going to call it. Jim, I think you mentioned you didn't have one this week, but Will, I'm pretty sure you've got at least 4 or 5 in you. Pick one. What's it gonna be?
Of the ones that have come out this weekend, I think that it's worth talking about the amusement park. This one is a very, very weird and kind of specific movie, but bear with me. The amusement park was a movie that George Romero, like Night of the Living Dead, George Romero, made back in 1973, and it got shelved. It never got used, and it was a short movie, like 54 minutes long. And it features Lincoln Mazel as this guy that visits this weird, surreal amusement park. And the original thing was done as a PSA against like elder abuse and the things that like elders experience, like, whether it be disenfranchisement, like the fact that their material possessions are taken from them sometimes when they're in certain homes, the lack of autonomy, the fact that they lose more and more of their ability to like interfere with society or interact with society, as certain things like driver's license and stuff like that get stripped away from them. So they decided, when they were making this PSA, they decided to go to George Romero and say, hey, can you tell this story, but make it a horror movie? And he does. He makes this weird ass horror movie about this guy walking through this like super bizarre amusement park, going from thing to thing. And each of them are little parallels for what it's like to like for elderly people. And then it got shelved. Nothing happened with it until Shudder got a hold of it and has it up on their platform now. And it's weird. I don't even know if I would call it necessarily good, so I want to put that out there too. But it is a very interestingly distilled version of kind of like what Romero is like as a filmmaker, and it's just like a creative. Distilled in that like he's not working as within like the studio setting. He's just making this weird fucking amusement park where all sorts of things go off the rails. So I strongly like, this is not a recommendation for every single audience member, but I think there are certain people who are in a very specific lane, that same lane that I find myself in a lot of the time, who I think would really enjoy watching this and seeing what Romero cooked up. So it's called The Amusement Park. And again, it's on Shudder.
Awesome, Will. I got to get on that Shudder train.
Got to get on that Shudder train. It is Brad disconnected. We'll give him a second to reconnect here, but that Shudder train is pound for pound, like what you get from that platform is just so much value. It's not always like the highest tier stuff, but what they've done a really good job of is curating. They go out and they find like a lot of films. There's so many films that die on the vine in the festival circuit, or when they finally get picked up, they get dropped like 87 pages deep on Netflix, and you never find
Especially
out about
genre
them again.
films. There's just so many of them.
Especially genre films. But when Shudder picks something up, no matter what it is, they highly prioritize it. They put it like on their top carousel. They put it there. They make sure that you like that eyes are going to see it. I have nothing but love for the Shudder folk. And now that I've said that publicly, I don't know. They're going to be terrible tomorrow because that's just the way these things work, right? As soon as you get behind someone, they're racist or whatever. But not Shudder, not Shudder. They're the good ones. These are the good guys.
The good guys. Yeah, I need to look into signing up for that app. I just got to figure out what else I can drop. At this point, because you end up with too much.
Well, and it's especially hard nowadays. We've got things like Paramount Plus, which I still need to get because the new season of Drag Race is coming out on Paramount Plus, and I want to watch it.
And Survivor.
And, oh God, yeah, Peacock, and like there's just like it's becoming so split up, and if you want all of these different platforms. It's funny. I was thinking the other day, like, oh, wouldn't it be great if there was just a bundle that had all of these things together? And I realized, like, oh, what I want is like what my old cable package was. So, which I hated at the time and wanted them to split up into individual things. We're giving Brad another moment here just to make sure before we take things out. So looks like he's not going to be able to get back in. Jim, how do you feel about taking us through the closing sections?
Yeah, sure. So let's we'll be back, of course, next week. We don't know what we're gonna do next week yet, but look for us here next week. You can find me at Twitter. At JJP Out West. JJP are my initials, and then the words Out West, all one word. That's where I like to tweet about films and talk movies. If anybody wants to talk movies, please get a hold of me there. Send me a message, or also look me up on Facebook under Jim Poliafico, my name.
Will, you can find me on Twitter. I'm at whatever cove there. You can see it. If you're watching live, you can see it right beneath my chin. You can find me on Facebook. Just look for William Lindis there. You can also find me on letterboxd.com. Look for William Lindis there. I track all the movies I watch there. So just give me a follow. I will give you a follow back.
Great and fantastic. And like I said, look for us next week. Share the show. Leave a comment. We'll be getting this show out for anybody who wasn't joining us live. And by the way, thank you to all our friends who joined us live. Bill Z, it was great seeing you here. So that's about it. I guess everybody have a good week, and we'll see you again next time. Take care.
Goodbye.